Hello, and welcome to Weathering the Storm, a Magic game design podcast. I'm your host, Emily, also known as Chartate 101,
And I'm Praveen, also known as Gateways.
and today we're going to be talking about the first Magic set, Alpha. So to kind of explain what's going to be going on here, we're going to basically be talking about each card in a given set, this time Alpha, and in it we'll be talking about how well made cards are. It has something to do with how good they are, but at the end of the day, a bad card can be well designed, and while it's a bit more rare, broken cards can also be well designed. Uh,
So
and a weak
so
card can also
basically,
be poorly designed.
so basically what we're going to be doing is going through the set and giving each card a grade overall so that towards the end we can calculate everything and give the set a total score based on how we think each design was and based on therefore the design of the overall set.
hmm as we go, we'll be talking a little bit about each set, but it's more about the cards themselves. So, with Alpha, so for a bit of context, it was the first set printed, so a lot of the cards have effects that they didn't know were very bad or very good. Some of them they did know were broken, and part of the reason why they were allowed to see print was because they assumed that people would open maybe 5 or 10 packs ever, and the one rare card or the one card per pack they get that's like rare in each pack, they might get like an ancestral recall, but it's just one. So that's why a lot of the broken cards exist, which is pretty important to talk about in the context of this set. So, starting off, we're going alphabetically by color. First off, we have Animate Wall. This card is an enchantment aura with Enchant Wall, and Enchanted Wall can attack as though it doesn't have Defender. So, this card is extremely niche. You really don't do anything with it. There are a lot more walls in Alpha than there are in the rest of in most Magic sets because of the fact that wall was tied to the now keyword defender.
Yeah, and I think one thing important to note about the wall is or animate wall is that most of the time the ability to doesn't doesn't matter because of the fact that their power can still be zero.
Yeah.
So overall, with there's only 6 cards in the set this synergizes with, and I believe only 2 of them actually have power. So overall, this is kind of a useless card within the context of the set.
Yeah, I think it's useless within the context of the set. And even if you're playing casually, I don't think that defender or walls are a card that are a kind of card that people want to be playing with. So it's not even a fun casual card, really.
It's just bad.
Yeah, it's just bad, and I think it's poorly designed. I think it's like a 2 out of 10. I think one thing that stops it from being the worst is that it's appropriately priced. Like it's a fine 1 mana card.
I think another good thing about the card is that with the Vorthos element, it plays exactly how you would expect, and it's pretty flavorful in terms of, it's giving you the ability. It's animate wall. It's what it
Yeah,
says on the tin,
that's one thing I actually
and
kind of love about Alpha is a lot of there's like two kinds of cards in Alpha. There's the one where they do exactly what it says in the name, and the ones you have no clue what they were going for. There's like no in between.
exactly. But I agree. Probably like a two or 3 out of 10 for me personally. Because of that flavorful aspect, I might be a little higher.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So we already come to in the second card the single most so edhrec.com has a list of the cards that make commander players the most salty. It was a big like community poll, and number one on that list was Stasis. Number two on that list was Armageddon. Um, I think that this card is not poorly designed. I think it's just too good.
I mean, personally, I think it's poorly designed in the context that there's no way that this is going to be fun for anybody unless you manage to make your lands indestructible, which isn't possible in alpha and
That's
isn't
very true.
possible in the con. So I personally would say that while it's an interesting design and it is angering, which may make some people happy, generally there's no state you can play this in that's fun.
So I think my disagreement with that is that I think that while land destruction I think land destruction is inherently very spiky. It's very spike oriented. It's not for that casual like I'm gonna play Commander with my friends. If this was a Commander podcast, I'd say it's a 1 out of 10. It's not a good card, but I think that there is merit, especially when you look at the context of Magic as a whole. Like kind of now with a 2020 lens, there's a lot of broken lands, and and a lot of aggro decks kind of like this, because what you want to do is you want to put all your stuff down because you don't need all your lands. So I don't think that it's the worst. I still don't love the card. I think it's like pretty average design wise. I think that it'd be a 4 or a 5. I think the fact that I think it nails flavor wise, is why I'd give it like a 5 out of 10.
I can give it. I can say 4 or 5. That sounds fine to me.
Mm. Then next up we have balance. Uh, Also, I realized I did not say what Armageddon does. Armageddon is a sorcery for 3 and a white. The only text is destroy all lands. Balance is a sorcery for 1 and a white. Um, its text says each player chooses a number of lands they control equal to the number of lands controlled by the player who controls the fewest lands, then sacrifices the rest. Players discard cards and sacrifice creatures the same way.
So I think this works where Armageddon fails in terms of the flavorful, the Melvin aspect. In in that it's really interesting that you have to equalize the board in terms of lands and creatures and cards in hand. So it limits the amount of ways that you can, gain parity with it, and objectively be on a better board state. But then by giving you the opportunity to create those situations, makes for a really fun card.
Yeah, I think this card's definitely fun. I do think that it'd be a lot more fun if it was not 2 mana. Uh, this card is banned in Legacy, Commander, and restricted in Vintage. I don't think that being a broken card inherently makes a card poorly designed. I still think this is a pretty good design. I will say, while it's not a break, the fact that you um, kind of force players to discard cards are is shaky, but it's not a big break. I don't think it's a break. I think it's a big bend. So
It's definitely a big
yeah,
bend.
which I think that's
Also,
one thing
don't
we should put into context is what the difference between a color pie bend is and a color pie break. A color pie break is when something undermines the weakness of a color. For example, printing murder in black or in any color. Sorry, printing murder in green or blue and arguably red would be a color pie break because it undermines the weaknesses of those colors. Blue cannot blue cannot respond and kill things that are already on the board. That's why it has counter spells. And green cannot kill creatures without creatures. But a bend is using something that the color doesn't normally do but does not undermine its weakness. Which is why I think that this would be a bend, because making the opponent discard cards does not inherently negate white's weakness, which is the fact that it can have all the answers in its deck but not in its hand.
Yeah, I agree. Also, one thing I wanted to mention when I said earlier that the balance, I think, or the design was good, I don't mean that the balance is good. I think
Mm.
it's a very bad design or card in terms of that mana cost. But I think what's important to look at in terms of design is don't look at the mana cost unless it's an important part of the card.
Mm-hmm.
If it's look at the effect. So for cards like Balance or for cards like Time Walk, that mana isn't really what the card is in terms of design, but there are some cards where mana is an important part of that. So
I
like the
think it. Yeah, I was gonna say the
Lotus's
Moxen.
Mox,
I was thinking
yeah,
the
all
Moxen
those
are a good
kinds of
example.
effects would be that's an inherent part of design is that it costs 0 mana,
Yeah,
which is that then would make it bad. But I don't think Balance is a bad design. I just think it's poorly balanced.
yeah. I think it's probably a 6 out of 10.
Yeah, I agree.
Next up, we have Banalish Hero, which
Oh
is
boy.
a 1/1 for white with banding. So I'm gonna just say I don't know what banding does. I assume that anyone listening to this doesn't know what banding does. I assume you don't know what banding does, do you?
Absolutely not.
I'm just gonna give this a 1 because no one knows what banding does, and I don't think that you can possibly say that any card with banding is a good design when no one knows what it does. I remember I heard a story, which was that Mark Rosewater went to a I don't know what it was called at the time, but it was a big tournament in like 1996 or something, and someone played a card with banding, and a top level tournament player had to ask a judge what banding did.
Yeah, it's a needlessly complex mechanic with so many features that are pretty easily fixed. You see in the future, Soul Bond and mechanics mutate even are all arguably variants of banding that are like not bad.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's while because obviously design is better in hindsight. Just the fact that a banding card exists is just really awful, and because of the fact that no one knows what it does, it's so needlessly complex. You can't give it anything more than a 1.
Mm-hmm. Also, this may just so for the record, I think that when it comes to the old lore, at least, I would say I'm probably more knowledgeable than you. I think that's pretty fair.
That's
Uh,
fair.
I don't think this flavor text is true. I'm pretty sure I could be wrong on this, and I am not 100% sure on this. I don't think that Benalia's caste system changes every year.
Not every year with the lunar year.
But still, I don't think that the caste system changes that frequently.
Yeah, that doesn't
So,
make
yeah,
any
that doesn't make
sense
sense. Yeah.
logically.
So, even if it makes sense in universe, it's poorly written because it doesn't make sense when you read it. Uh, anyway, so we both gave that card a 1. The next card on this list is Black Ward, which is an enchantment for white with enchant aura, enchant creature. In this enchanted creature has protection from black. This effect does not remove Black Ward. I believe this is a cycle. Yes,
Yeah,
it
I'm
is.
pretty sure.
I think that for this cycle we can pretty much rank them all at once.
Yeah, I
So
think these are
also protection for those who don't know. Um, Protection means that a creature cannot be, the permanent cannot be attacked or cannot be dealt damage, blocked, targeted, enchanted, or equipped by anything that is the property. In this case, black or whatever color in the cycle.
this is a pretty solid mechanic, I'd think, in terms of early design. Looking at it from that lens, obviously in the future we're going to be seeing cards that don't just have protection from color but have protection from different aspects, and I think the fact that the mechanic has that kind of potential makes it a pretty solid mechanic, even though they did phase it out and then phase it back in recently.
Yeah. I think that specifically cards granting something protection in this kind of way, I don't know if I like that as a design, but I think I like it more actually than creatures that just have protection from color built in. Because with a card like this, it is purely a sideboard card. You never play this card in your main deck. Um, which is why I like it as opposed to um, I'm trying to think of any other card, but some good card that just happens to have protection from white or something. Like it's already a good
Mirren
card.
Crusade.
Yeah, sure. That card's already good, and it just kind of makes matchups even more unwinnable.
Yeah, I think it's really dependent on how good each card is at a base rate. I think cards that are like traditionally would be good on rate if you're playing against their deck that'd be like good sideboard cards make for really good are really good designs. And I think this works as one of them because you're only paying one mana and you
Yeah,
have basically immunity from a deck of
yeah, I think this card's pretty well designed. I'd say it's like a 5 out of 10. My one concern is that, and this, I don't know how exactly it is fair to complain about this. Keywords in Alpha did not have reminder text, and protection is not exactly the most intuitive ability. I don't know
I
if
think
that's
at the
fair to hold that I don't know if it's fair to hold that against the card.
I don't think it is.
That's fine. Then in that case, I'd probably say this is a 5 out of 10.
I I
I would have said it's a 4 if I could hold that against it.
I would say 6 honestly. I think this is just a solid design. Like there's
Yeah,
no real problems here. So I think that's where
yeah,
my
this
baseline is.
and this applies to all of the wards.
Yeah.
Um, Blaze of Glory. For white mana, for 1 white, you get cast this or instant with cast the spell only during combat before blockers are declared. Target creature defending player controls can block any number of target creatures this turn. It blocks each attacking creature this turn if able. Um, so this card's weird, but I kind of really like it.
I agree. I think the wording is obviously confusing because it is older, but like and it that reflects that in the new Oracle text. But I think just as a concept, this card works really well. It's just block everything and die in a blaze of glory. It does again what it says on the tin.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that this card kind of came back in a weird way 20 years later with the card Hundred Handed One from Theros. In a way, it's in the terms of it can block any creatures basically. Uh, I don't know. I think it's a really cool card, and I also think the art is really good. I think that most art in Alpha is bad. I think that most art in early Magic is not good, but this one I think is one of the better arts in the set.
Yeah, I think the arts succeed when you can clearly see what the card is intending to do,
Yeah,
and
for sure.
especially on instants and sorceries, and this one tells a story.
Yeah, which is something really cool, especially from early Magic.
Yeah. But for the design itself, I'd probably give it a 7. I think it's just a really solid design. Maybe a little weird, but like, it works.
Yeah. Um, Next up we have Blessing. Blessing is an aura for 2 white mana. With enchant creature. It's an enchantment with it's an enchantment aura with enchant creature, and for 1 white mana, enchanted creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So this card's cool. It I don't know why this card is white because that is typically referred to as the shade ability, which is a very black thing. It's not a problem. Like it's not a. It doesn't even hurt pie wise. It's fine. It's not even a bend. It's just weird.
Yeah, I'd agree, but honestly, color pie issues, other than in terms of like huge breaks, I would say aren't really a big issue in alpha because they're obviously working everything out.
For sure.
So I don't
Um.
have much of a problem with it at
Oh
all.
yeah, no. I think it's a pretty small issue, but I definitely think it's worth pointing out.
Yeah. But personally, I think I would rate this card at like a 6. It's just a fine enchantment. It buffs your creature. It's
Yeah, I
pretty
think.
simple.
Yeah, I think Blessing is a pretty neat card. I will say, the art is cool. I think that the like building in the background just looks weird to me.
It looks straight out of like a middle school textbook with like
Yeah, it
scribbled drawings.
does. Next up we have Castle. This is an enchantment for 3 generic mana and 1 white mana. Untapped creatures you control get +0/+2. I do not like this card. I
It
think that things that I think that for the most part things that don't that give you an incentive to not attack are often poorly designed. Not always, but often.
I agree, especially because this is a global effect and just lasts throughout the whole game.
Yeah.
Effectively, what it's going to incentivize you to do is just turtle throughout
Or
the entire.
actually, it is not symmetrical.
I don't mean symmetrical. I mean, what was the word?
Sta-
It's because it's like just it lasts through it forever. It's not, a one-time thing
yeah,
where you
okay,
get a
yeah.
boost to block
Static?
a creature. It's just for the rest of the game you get plus O
Yeah,
plus
yeah,
two, and you just defend until you.
yeah.
I
God,
also think one thing.
imagine if this was a symmetrical effect.
Yeah,
It'd be so much worse.
yeah. I think one more thing to note about this card is that just the fact that there's this plus O plus two is just such a weird boost in terms of stat lines, and like early Magic was filled with so much more of these than we usually get. Just these weird buffs, because normally you get in normal Magic specs, plus one or plus one plus O or some kind of multiplier on that. But a lot of these times, in early Magic, you get +2 +1 counters and all these weird kinds of
God, don't get me started
boosting
on
counters and
Frankenstein's monster.
count counters should have just been +1 +1 -1 -1.
Yeah.
But uh, it's just a weird boost, and it really just makes it weird in terms of blocking everything and just turtling the whole.
Yeah. So next up, or so for ranking these, or for ranking Castle, I would give it a 3 out of 10. I think the concept is not inherently flawed, or I think the concept's inherently flawed. I think the flavor is very good.
I would give it a 4 for that reason, with the same reasoning in mind. You know, because it's a castle, it's defense, but that's not good for the.
Gameplay, yeah. Next up, we have a cycle of 5 cards. The Circles of Protection. These are all enchantments for 1 white, or for 1 generic and 1 white, that are enchantments with an activated ability. 1 generic mana. The next time a white source of your choice would deal damage to you this turn, prevent that damage.
I think
I
these are pretty good designs.
mhm. I
Yeah, it's
mostly like
just
it. I think my one problem with it is that I think it's too good, not in terms of the card being too good, but the card is too good at not letting your opponent do things.
I think that's a fair argument, but it's just a really efficient sideboard piece in a lot of decks that goes through to like pretty late, pretty mid standard.
Yeah,
It exists in standard for a long time, and I think that it does do a lot of damage to decks when it's trying, all of that. But overall, it's an interesting design, and even there's still outs against it because it only prevents damage from one source per mana.
yeah.
So if you can get your opponent off mana or off resources, you can still pretty easily deal with it.
Especially
But
because
it's
especially because white is not a color known for a lot of mana.
right, and also, there are just a lot of like go wide storm tactics you can do to just kind of prevent people from winning instantly with this card.
Yeah. This isn't a thing I dislike about the card. I just think it's interesting. Is that it's one of the few cards in Magic with a colon in the name.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
It's like how there's one card. I think it's from. It's from the old border or for the first border, but there's a card. There's one card with an exclamation point.
Was that Eureka, or did that not have?
I'm not sure. Well, I don't know. Maybe. Next up, we have Consecrate Land. This is for 1 white mana, we have an enchantment aura with Enchant Land. Enchanted land has indestructible and can't be enchanted by other auras.
We missed the ranking on Circle of Protection.
Oh, sorry. I would give the Circles of Protection 5 out of 10.
I personally would give them a 7. I think
That's
they're
very valid.
Yeah, I think it's like the other enchantment cycle that we had before with that just cost 1 mana and was an enchant creature and gave protection, but
Yeah,
I think it's a better design in terms of that it's a lot more efficient in shutting down decks with while still having some options to play around it.
For sure. Then I think that now we have Consecrate Land. This is the indestructible enchantment. I think that this card and most things that care about enchanting lands, not all, but most, are poorly designed because, especially in the olden days, even though there was more land destruction, I still think they overestimated how much there was. You don't need to give your land indestructible. That's just not a thing you ever want to do.
Maybe not ever want to do, but when it costs a card to just give indestructible and protection against auras, then because you're wasting a mana and you're wasting a card, which is super valuable, especially in early days in white, especially,
Yeah.
and it's a big waste of resources to try and pull that. So I think it's just a
Yeah,
pretty bad design.
I'd give it a 1 out of 10. I think it's probably the worst card we've looked at, other than the banding card.
I'd give it a 2. I don't think it's awful. I think it has its niche cases, especially if you want to use it in like a janky Armageddon deck. But
That's true.
overall, it's just
That's true. Next up we have Conversion. Um, this is a enchantment for 2 generic and 2 white mana. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice this card unless you pay 2 white mana, and all mountains are plains. Okay. This is such a weird, bad card.
yeah. It's because I think the problems with it are that it's first of all it's a sideboard only card.
Yeah.
You're never going to play this in your main deck. It's never going to be good in your main deck. But I think the other main issue with it is that
I mean,
because it's
technically speaking, this is mana fixing in white. You know what? I might want to play this in Commander.
you right, huh? How about that?
Yeah, but yeah, like you were kind of saying, it's a sideboard card. But weirdly enough, I don't. I think this card is not poorly designed because it's basically a ridiculously inefficient Blood Moon. Uh,
Yeah,
but I
exactly.
think that Blood Moon is a better design, or I think this is a better design than Blood Moon because of the fact you have to keep paying into it. I almost wish this was a card from like 5 sets later and could have had like cumulative upkeep white. That would have been cool.
I think my problem with this card is that if you're going to be like a Blood Moon variant, it needs to be efficient. Otherwise, it's pretty worthless. And the fact that it's both inefficient in terms of the type of land that it's getting, and also the fact that you have to pay for it, I think it hurts it a lot in terms of that regard for design for me.
For sure. I'd give it like a 5 out of 10. Maybe actually, I'm gonna give it a 6.
I'd give it a 4.
That's valid. Next up, we have Crusade. Oh boy. For 2 white mana, you get an enchantment with white creatures get +1/+1. Disturbing implications aside, I think that this is a card that's pretty peak alpha in terms of design. Just, I think that caring about color in this way is not healthy for the game, and old Magic did a lot of it. I don't think this is the worst defender. I think the fact that it is global very much hinders the design, though.
Yeah, I agree. I think actually if this wasn't global, it would have been a pretty solid design in terms of the set. I don't
Yeah, for
think color
sure.
matters inherently bad. I think that it's a fine mechanic when used sparingly because it's good to promote monocolored decks sometimes and let shift
Mhm.
happen. But I think overall the worst part of this card is definitely just it's the global nature because it fails to reward you when your opponent is doing the same thing as you.
Yeah. I would give this card a 5 out of 10.
I would give it a 4, just mostly because of that global aspect.
That's valid. Um, Next up, we have Death Ward. Um, Death Ward is an instant for 1 white mana with regenerate target creature. Oh boy. So, regenerate, basically what it did. I don't know exactly how it worked. I'll be completely honest, I didn't really play when it was around in a big capacity. But basically, what it did was it would make it so your creature was indestructible, and it tapped it so that it couldn't block while being indestructible. I think that's basically what it did. This is
No,
odd.
you're right.
Yeah, this is odd in white because the colors that most often regenerated were green and black, I believe.
Yeah, I agree. That said, this is a very white effect if you don't look at the keyword
Oh, for
in
sure, I
terms,
agree.
because, white does get limited reanimation, especially reanimation in terms of like bring back everything that died this turn.
Yeah,
So when you have a creature that's bringing back itself after, or a spell that brings back the creature that just died, technically, well, it's fine design. I think it's costed pretty well in terms of that
if
to
you
be
look
kind
at
of a
this
janky.
card as a white card with instant target creature gains indestructible until end of turn, tap it. It's a good card. It's a fine card.
Yeah, I have no problems with
I think I'd give this a 7.
agree.
Okay, next up we have Disenchant, which is an instant for 1 and a white with destroy target artifact or enchantment. I think this card, well, given the fact that this card sees printing all the time, this card saw print in, I believe, in Theros Beyond Death. No, that had Revoke Existence. I think this was in
the last time
Throne
this
of
was
Eldraine.
printed was in no, the last time this was printed was in Magic Core Set 2020.
Ah, okay. I knew it was in Standard. That makes sense.
But yeah, overall, this is a really solid design, and because it gives you a lot of play around in terms of decks that are enchantment based, artifact based, which we see all the time nowadays. And it's good. They found a really good value to print it at. They found a really good niche for it in terms of making it an instant, pretty efficient, all that. So I'm a big fan of the design.
Yeah, I think I'd give it like I think I'd give it an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, 8 out of 10 sounds good.
Next up, we have Farmstead. Oh boy. Farmstead is an enchantment for white, white, white. It's an aura with enchant land. Enchanted land has, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may pay white, white. If you do, you gain 1 life. Oh boy.
That's why. Yikes.
I think there's an argument that this is the weakest card in Alpha. Potentially.
Yeah, I think that's fair. This is just incidental life gain is what we see. That's the only kind of life gain that's playable nowadays. Spells or abilities that are just, gain life are never played, and for good reason.
Yeah.
Except for I think Feed the Clan and Modern in some decks, but that's a side case. But basically what this is you have to pay a substantial amount of mana, especially in white, in order to gain 1 life, plus the fact that you had to pay 3 mana to do it before.
Yeah,
this card is awful.
If this card was just 3 white mana and gained you a life at the beginning of your upkeep, it would still be one of the weakest cards in the set. Radiant Fountain, I believe, is you gain a life at the beginning of your upkeep, and I think it's 2 generic mana. Also, this card is a rare.
Oh, was it? I didn't even realize.
I haven't been looking at the rarities, but it's pretty funny when you do. I think this is a 1 out of 10. I don't even think the flavor's that good.
It's not. It's just
decent.
A farm.
It's not good, yeah.
Yeah, I would say a 2 because it's I would just say.
Yeah. Next we have Guardian Angel. This is not a creature. This is an instant for X and a white. Prevent the next X damage that would be dealt to any target this turn. Until end of turn, you may pay 1 at any time you could cast an instant. If you do, prevent the next 1 damage that would be dealt to that permanent or player this turn. This is weird.
This could have costed a white and got rid of the X bit, and it would have made no difference.
Yeah, honestly. That's true. No one's ever casting it for X. Or everyone's always casting it for X equals 0. I think this card's hard to parse.
It's
Weirdly enough,
complex. It's
I think this is one of the instances where I think that reading the text on the card is more intuitive than the Oracle text.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think some cards in Alpha have that thing where they aren't in Magic Ease, but they
Yeah,
work really well. Obviously, some of them are not
I think
because
the
we
best
have
example of
Bando.
that is
But
not from Alpha, or I don't think it's from Alpha, but it's from, I think, Ice Age with Obulette, which is a very fan requested reprint because it works super well when you just read the card, but it does so much weird stuff that Magic just doesn't do, really, and it's hard to write Oracle text for.
yeah, yeah, I think that's a really good take on it. So I think I'm giving it more credit because of the fact that it's readable in terms of
Non Magic
the
Ease.
that it makes sense, but at the same time it's still you still always want to cast this for just white.
Yeah, and I
There's
also just
still
think
it
it's
doesn't
it's really weak, like really really weak. Um,
it's just
but
not good.
yeah, I mean, I think I'd give it a four.
I think I can give it a 4 as well.
Next up, we have Healing Salve, part of the Boon cycle. For white mana. It's an instant with choose one. Target player gains 3 life. Prevent the next 3 damage that would be dealt to any target this turn. So this is the weakest card in the Boon cycle by far. Uh,
I think it's just really funny how this cycle has 3 of the most broken cards in Magic history and a worthless common.
yeah, I think it shows a lot when they made a version of this card in Dominaria that was not modal. It just always did both modes, and it was still unplayably bad in both constructed and limited.
Yeah, exactly.
That shows a lot. Um, I also think that cards that just gain you life are fundamentally flawed design, and I guess this technically does something other than that, but preventing damage is mostly just uh, like gaining life. And honestly, I don't know. I think this is just a very poorly designed card. I also think that the art is really weird.
I think personally what makes it badly designed is that there's no way you can cost this without it being bad. Like
Yeah,
at 0 this is problematic, at 1 it's awful, and then there's no way that this can work.
yeah. I will say, I think that if you printed 0 mana instant, you gain 3 life without the preventing damage part, it'd probably be a not busted card.
I mean it would break color pie, but yeah, sure.
Sure. Uh, but yeah. Next up, we have Holy Armor.
I'd give it a 3.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Give it a 3 for you. Um, Holy Armor is an enchantment for white with Enchantment Aura. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +0/+2, and you can pay white to give enchanted creature +0/+1 until end of turn. I mean, this card's not bad, like in terms of power level. It's honestly not bad at all for alpha.
Especially considering creatures were not very
Good.
good in the
Yeah.
original sets. Having this toughness boost kind of makes it so that you're not going to die to other creatures ever, because
Yeah.
there's nothing big enough to stop you once you have enough mana.
Yeah, honestly feel like it's you can kind of treat the second ability as if it's like 4 mana it gains indestructible.
Yeah, I
And
think
like at that
that's
point on
fair.
a 1 drop, that's not bad.
Yeah,
Although I
it's a
guess it's not
solid.
really a 1 drop because you can never play it turn 1 unless you have a 0 drop creature, but like still.
Yeah, but overall, I think this is solid design. I think it's just a good way to buff your creatures, a good way to make sure they.
Yeah, I think I'd give it like a 5 out of 10.
I think I'd give it a 6.
Yeah, it's like a fine card. Next up, we have Holy Strength, which is an enchantment aura for white with enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+2. This card is not good, but it's also far from bad in terms of power level.
Yeah,
Um,
I know this was reprinted in one of the core sets, and it wasn't awful in like the limited formats.
mhm.
So it was bad, obviously, but it wasn't awful. It's still, like a low C, high D level card. So it's pretty solidly designed, a nice small buff for your creatures, and
Yeah, but last time this was printed was Magic 2011. Uh,
yeah, I don't have much else to say.
yeah,
This
I
is
mean, it's a
just
pretty
a
boring
neat,
card.
neat.
I would give it a 5 out of 10 because it's boring.
Yeah, sure.
Next up, we have Island Sanctuary, an enchantment for 1 white. With if you would draw a card during your draw step, instead you may skip that draw. If you do, until end of turn, you can't be attacked except by creatures with flying and/or island walk. I think this card's pretty cool.
I think it's a neat design. I think, in terms of flavor, you have the flying and or island walk. It's on a little island, so
Yeah.
and it gives the card a lot of natural outs, and it gives a way to counter the card. And I think the fact that you have to skip a draw to get that bonus means that your opponent is just gonna start accumulating value until they can hit flying creatures or island walk creatures or
Or enchantment
enchantment
removal.
removal. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of it's not a it's not a great card in terms of the fact that there's a pretty easy way to get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
So you should be solid.
Yeah. I actually may be controversial. I think this card's really well designed.
Yeah, I agree.
I think this is like an 8 out of 10. I really like this.
I think I'd say 7, but I think overall it's just solid,
Yeah.
a nice, way to change the game.
Yeah, next up we have Karma, which is an enchantment for 2 generic and 2 white mana. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, Karma deals damage to that player equal to the number of swamps they control. Uh, sure. I think that's
Yeah, I
all I
think
really have to say.
yeah, I think barring the color pie issue here of white not being able to deal direct damage, I think this is a solid answer. I think this is a solid example of color hatred that works pretty well because it's not an instant loss, but it's something that's going to win you the game pretty quickly if your opponent can't do anything about
I
it.
think that's fair. Yeah, I think this is. I don't know. I don't really have anything to say about this. It's just solid, I guess.
I think though because of the fact that it is white direct damage, that does dock it a little for me, but overall the idea and the concept is solid.
Yeah, I think I'd give this like a 4 out of 10. Mostly because of the color pie issue.
Give it a 4.
Next up, we have Lance, which is an enchantment for white with, or aura, with enchanted creature has first strike.
This is obviously not that good,
Yeah.
but I mean in terms of like balance, but in terms of design, I think it's a solid card in terms of it's a lance. Creature picks up the lance. It's using the lance to fight. It has first strike.
Yeah.
Again, it's one of those pretty easy to understand designs, and I think works in that.
Yeah, I think my problem with it is that I think that cards that grant first strike without granting any other benefit are not well designed because first strike inherently works, at least if it's at sorcery speed. If it's at instant speed, it's different. If it's at sorcery speed, I don't know. I don't think I like this that much. I think the flavor, like you said, is just kind of a pickup and you know what it does, which is definitely a benefit. But
Yeah, I think a lot of the cards in alpha that work are do so on the basis of their flavor because they haven't figured out, the way magic cards are supposed to work yet. So it's just intuition that really makes everything
yeah, I think I'd give it a 4.
for as well.
If I didn't think the flavor was so good, I'd probably give it a 2 or 3. Uh, Next up we have Mesa Unicorn, which is a creature Pegasus. Also, I haven't been saying the creature types, but they don't matter yet, so it's fine. Uh, with 1 and a white, 1/1, with flying and banding. 1 out of 10. Banding sucks.
2 out of 10. I like the flavor.
That's fine. That's valid. Uh, yeah, I think that the flavor text is weird, but not good or bad. It's just weird.
I mean, I think that it works within the context of the card. It's like,
For sure.
it works as like you see this Pegasus and like it's a blessing, and then you get to fight with it.
Yeah, I think it's
In a,
funny that they kind of had to justify why the hell this random Pegasus has banding.
but it works.
Yeah, I think it's not bad. Next up, we have Northern Paladin. For 2 white, you have a creature human knight. With it's a 3/3 with white tap, destroy target black permanent. So, I don't dislike this, surprisingly. I think it's at a weird point in design where it's not good enough to break anything, but it's not bad enough that no one ever played. That it's like the obscure color hate bad card.
Yeah, I agree. I also think because early magic is more spell based, the fact that you're using it to destroy a permanent isn't really that relevant
Yeah.
because the only real situations where you're facing a meaningful amount of black permanents is you get turn one hypnotic spectered, in which case you're probably already lost,
Yeah. To be fair, pretty
or just
soon.
generic deck.
This I feel like not too soon after alpha, you could be blowing up like a necropotent. But like, yeah, they've
Yeah,
probably
yeah,
already
no, I
gotten
think
value out of that though.
yeah, I think one thing that's important to note is that the sheer amount of color hate spells that are in the set, especially in white, it's definitely too much.
For
I
sure,
think that
that's a problem with the
color
set.
matters. It's a problem with the set, but I think that color matters is an interesting theme. But when you have so many color hate cards, it basically prevents your cards from being playable in a normal context because most of them are only good when you bring them in later in the game.
For sure.
So it's just a weird spot to have your a good majority of the set to design in because like keep in mind, although we did skip over cycles, like we've had 2 5 card cycles that are just color hate plus I think 2 or 3 other cards all just in
Yeah.
white in the first half of white. So it's just a ton of color hate that's overbearing on the set.
Yeah. Uh, what do you, did I give my rating? I'm not sure.
I think so.
I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 10.
I'll give it a 4 as well. Just looking at the card individually without the context of this.
Yeah. Next up, we have Pearled Unicorn, which is a vanilla 2/2 for 3.
Gray
For
Ogre.
2 white, yeah. Um, I mean, what's there to say? It's a bad vanilla creature. Uh,
I
I'm
mean,
gonna.
it wasn't bad at the time, was it?
It was
I mean,
not good at the time.
it wasn't. Let me clarify. It wasn't like unplayably bad. It
That's
because
fair.
of the fact that Alpha,
Yeah,
and early Magic was a very spell
spell-based
heavy
game.
game.
Yeah,
So your creatures are going to have more value by virtue of that. But
yeah,
overall, it's just part of the reason of that though is that they were bad. So when you have this 2 mana, 3 mana 2/2, it's like, all right, this is not worth much.
yeah. I'm gonna also say this might just be a me thing, but I am very happy they stopped putting real world quotes in the flavor text. So, and I am docking for that.
That's interesting. I actually never had a problem with it personally. I thought it was a cool touch for the core sets and sets like Alpha.
Actually,
I
that's a
think
good
that
point. That's actually a good
I think
point.
it interferes. I think it interferes a lot if you're doing it within the context of a named set on a plane that you know a lot about. Like if, for instance, if it was set on like Theros and you had Homer quotes, that ruins
Yeah,
the immersion because we're trying to pretend that Theros is not just Greece.
yeah,
But I think if you have it in a core set, you don't have that immersion to break other than just generic magic and fantasy stuff. So I think it's not as harmful. So I don't mind it as much. And considering, Dominaria at this point of the game, it wasn't a plane; it was
it was just
everything.
magic.
And
Yeah.
Alpha was just this was generic
I think I
expansion.
do disagree that stuff like this is fine in core sets, but I think I would say explicitly the only time ever I am fine with it is in alpha because there was no lore at all.
That's
I think
fair.
that once you get to a core set, it's still not justifiable to me because the cards still take place somewhere in the multiverse. We don't know where, but they take place somewhere.
Yeah, that's a
And
fair
we
point.
know for a fact that human Earth is not a place in the Magic multiverse. So,
Right. I think what I mean in terms of that is like obviously it's a flaw in terms of the cards and it's like it's wrong, but it's not immersion breaking in a core set where it's
that's
immersion
fair.
breaking.
That makes sense. Um,
Personally, card I have no problems with. It's just a vanilla, so I'll just give it a
I'm gonna give it a 5. If it was in any other set, I'd give it a 4 because of the flavor text thing. Next, we have Personal Incarnation. This is a creature avatar incarnation for 3 white, white, white. Um, it's a 6/6 with an activated ability for 0 mana. The next 1 damage that would be dealt to Personal Incarnation this turn is dealt to its owner instead. Only its owner may activate this ability. When it dies, its owner loses half their life, rounded up. So, this card is weird, right? I think it's cool, though.
I think it's cool. I think, you know, it's the redirection is an interesting effect and it works flavorfully because it's you. So it allows you to split the damage between you and the creature. And I think while the last line of text is weird, it makes sense in the sense that if this creature is a reflection of you, destroying it is destroying half of you.
Yeah, I think it works.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously weird, but it works for Alpha.
Also, it's a 6/6 for 6 in Alpha. That's good.
That's solid. With
Yeah.
some upside, some downside. Obviously
I
more
think it's more
downside
downside,
still.
yeah. But, like, for Alpha, this isn't bad.
Yeah, I'd give it a 6, I think.
I agree with a 6. Next up, we have Pure Lace. Um, it is an instant for white with target spell or permanent becomes white. This card sucks. I think it's
This
very
I
poorly
think
designed.
every single card in Magic, I think that is just this thing becomes another color without any way to capitalize on that or change that is just an awful design. Because there's no interest and it only works with other things in a very limited context. And especially in a set like Alpha, where changing the color of something opens it up to a lot of different removal tactics. It's interesting in the sense that maybe, and it doesn't work in white because white doesn't have much hate for white itself, except
Uh,
for like the circles of protection,
yeah,
I
the circle. I
think.
was gonna say that the circle protection cycle does have white. And I'm also pretty sure that the aura cycle, I forget what it's
Oh, did
called.
it?
I
Yeah.
think there's a white one of that. I could be wrong.
Well, yeah, but still, I think overall it's just a weird card that is useless except when paired with other useless cards.
Yeah, that's a
And
good way of putting it.
even then it's still bad. So I have no use for that.
This card should be on the top, like, post of all time on bad MTG combos. Up there with the one that turns the game into Uno and the one that turns the game into a way for you to own every card in existence.
My personal favorite is the one where it allows you to rip up your opponent's decks.
That's fun too. Uh, Next up, we have Resurrection. This is a sorcery for 2 generic and 2 white mana. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield.
I think this is just peak reanimation.
Yeah, I'm surprised that this isn't what people call, like, the peak reanimation. I guess because it's white and not black.
Yeah, I think so. Obviously it is in White's color pie, but
It's
it
a,
does feel
yeah,
a little
weird.
it's a good weird. But the card itself is simple and it's easy to understand and it brings back a creature, which is a pretty solid effect.
Yeah, I mean, and it brings it back to the battlefield. This card's good. Like, this card, I think that if there were any graveyard decks at the time, there weren't because there was nothing to capitalize off of it. This would probably, or no, let me put it this way: if there were good enough creatures and any mill, this card would be playable at the time.
I think any card that gets reprinted into Ultimate Masters has a leg to stand on in terms of playability.
That's fair. I'm gonna give this an 8 out of 10.
I'm gonna give it a 7 because I think it is simple, but yeah.
Yeah. Next up, we have Reverse Damage, which is an instant for 1 generic and 2 white mana. It's an instant with the next time a source of your choice would deal damage to you this turn, prevent that damage. You gain life equal to the damage prevented this way. So, I think that this card is bad, but I think it's really funny because I think that the uses where it is playable lead to fun gameplay.
I think this is a solid design. I know in the past we've seen. I think the perfected version of a card like this is Narset's the
Reversal.
card in Tarkir that redirected the damage to an opponent's face instead of gaining you life. But I think this is a really solid version of that effect where it's gaining you the life instead. And if there were, I think we're going to say this a lot, but if there were things that were big enough in creatures that were big enough in alpha to be relevant, then this would be probably better.
So, actually, if this was 1 mana cheaper, I think this would be extremely, extremely playable in alpha. Want to know why? Channel Fireball. If this was 2 mana, then because Channel is 2 mana. So if this was 2 mana, then if you went first, you could use this in response to a 20 Fireball.
Yeah, I guess that would make it pretty solid.
I think that if this card was 1 mana less, I'd like it way more. Because I feel like it's just super inefficient, and it would have done something. As is, I think I'd give this, like, a 6 out of 10.
I can agree with the 6. I think, obviously, balance-wise it's weak, but design-wise it's strong.
Yeah, that makes sense. Next up is Righteousness, which is an instant for white, with target blocking creature gets +7/+7 until end of turn. This was reprinted in Throne of Eldraine, and I don't know why.
Wait, it was?
It was.
Oh man, I did not see much of that set, huh?
This card saw no play in Limited, and obviously no play in Constructed, because it is very, very bad. Like, power-wise.
That said, I think that design-wise, I think it's pretty interesting.
I think it's an interesting design, yeah.
You get a huge buff for this blocking creature, and it allows you to destroy an attacking creature pretty efficiently, especially in alpha. And I might have a soft spot for this card because one of my first decks was the Elspeth versus QR dual decks, and one of the cards in there was Hold the Line, which was a version of this that boosted for all of your blocking creatures, which I was one of the cards that I like playing most in that deck. So I might have a soft spot for it, but overall, I think it's just a solid design.
I think the flavor's also solid. Really cool.
Yeah, just gives you that boost for defense only, and it fits into a flavor of like non-aggression and only being attacked when provoked or whatever.
Yeah. Next up, we have Samite Healer.
I'd give it a 6.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Next up, we have Samite Healer, which is a creature for 1 and a white, human cleric. It's a 1/1, and you can tap it to prevent the next 1 damage that would be dealt to any target this turn. I think that this card is alright, but not particularly interesting.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, there's not much to say about it. It's just a reverse Seasoned Pyromancer.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, not Seasoned Pyromancer. What was it called? Tim. The Tim deck. Yeah. I can't remember the actual name.
It's
Prodigal Sorcerer.
Prodigal Sorcerer. Except that's way better, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
I think that this card is also very similar to something like Mother of Runes. Or Mother of... What's it called? The tap gain a life. Or no. The tap gain protection. Sorry. It's like that, but bad.
That's Mother of Runes.
Yeah, okay, I was right. It's like that, but bad. Also, this was a common, which is weird, I feel like.
Yeah, this seems strange in multiples, but overall, I'm just okay with it.
Also, I think it's weird that I can use this, block a 1/1, tap it to prevent the damage to itself. That's weird.
Yeah, I think
It's almost a
flavorfully
1-1 with
aspect
first
of it,
strike. Almost.
not really, honestly. I think that there's corner cases where you could make that work, but
That's fair.
overall, I think it just acts as mostly just what it does and gets you the edge in certain situations. But I think that is a problem that it heals itself, which just feels weird. And because of the fact that I think any creature that blocks and then taps and has an effect on combat always has it always feels strange to me.
Yeah. I'm going to give this a 4 out of 10.
I would give it a 5, I think, because
That's
I
fair.
think it's just a solid effect.
Yeah. Next up, we have Savannah Lions. This is a vanilla 2-1 for white mana. This card saw a ton of competitive play at the time. Or, not a ton, but it saw a decently large amount of competitive play at the time. And saw play even when it got reprinted into Standard in like 2006 or something.
Yeah, I mean it's just the classic aggro creature, just a good old solidly statted common, or not common, but a good old solidly statted creature
Yeah, this was a
that
rare. This was a
it was a
vanilla
yeah,
rare.
which is we will see more of those in the future with Isamaru and Yargle, but at the
Yeah.
time it was interesting.
Yeah. Well, Yargle was an uncommon.
Was Yargle okay? Yeah,
It was a
no,
7
you're
3,
right.
yeah, for uncommon for
I
4
just my brain
mana.
said legendary.
Or no, 5 mana.
But I think overall this works really well as a design in terms of being a rare and being a vanilla because it's efficient and it feels like a rare at the time because of the fact that it's just a good creature, a good efficient creature that you're happy to play.
Yeah, for sure. I would give it a 7 out of 10. I really like it. This is
Yeah, I'd give it a
probably this is probably my favorite possible stat line for a vanilla creature.
yeah, I think so. Well, actually, I think my personal favorite is a 3/2 because then you get more interesting interactions with doubles and
That's
like
fair. That's definitely
leaving
fair.
creatures behind. There's a whole article about it. I'm talking
Ah,
about Eldritch Moon Standard.
I would like you
I'll
to
send it
link
to
that
you.
to me after that. Yeah, after this.
Yeah, I will send that to you
That
sometime.
seems super interesting.
But overall, it's just a solid vanilla.
Yep. Next up, we have Sarah Angel, which is a creature for 3 white creature angel with flying and vigilance. It's a 4/4. So there's many things to talk about with this card. First of all, I would make an argument it is in the 5 most iconic cards in all of Magic. It's extremely iconic. Second, I think the art is probably the best in Alpha for me. This is one of my personal favorite cards of all time. It's probably in the top 15, I'd say. I really like this card. Next, to anyone watching this, Sarah is not the angel. Sarah is not the goddamn angel, and everyone messes this up. Sarah is the planeswalker who made the angels. And I can't blame people for thinking that because it's very easy to think that. I thought that for a long time, and that's why this card should have been called Sarah's Angel, and that's all I have to say about how much I really like this card. I give this an 8 out of 10. I really like this.
I think me personally, I don't have as big of an attachment to it as you clearly do, but overall, it's a really serviceable card. Even today, we can see in limited formats like Dominaria, it's just a solid beater and pretty good. So I would give it a 7, I think. Just a
Yeah,
good
like this
design.
was the best. This like power wise, this was the best creature in Alpha, uh, which is crazy. Um, Also, the last thing, the reason why I like this card so much is because Sarah is my favorite. Sarah is my either favorite or second favorite Planeswalker. Um, Next up, we have Swords to Plowshares. This is an instant for white. With exile target creature, its controller gains life equal to its power. This is the strongest piece of removal ever printed in Magic. I don't think that anyone can make an argument otherwise. It's just so good.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think that I think there are cases for something like a dismember in terms of
That's fair.
that, but I think this is the best you're ever going to get in white,
Hmm.
period. And I think the only other color that has a claim to that maybe is a black card that I'm not thinking of. But overall, it's just a super solid removal spell, and flavorfully,
I
it
was about to hit
works
on that.
in terms of that design.
I think this might be the most flavorful card in all of Alpha.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
At least
Because
up
the
there. It's
creature,
super good
yeah,
flavor.
yeah, the creature is removed from the game, and then it becomes a farmer and it gains you some life.
Yeah,
And because of the fact that based on its power, how much work it's able to do, you're gonna get more life based on how much that creature does, which is
yeah.
super
I
interesting.
also really like the art. I like how he's like looking at the horizon.
Yeah, it's just a really well designed card
Yeah.
in terms of that.
Despite being far too powerful, I'm gonna give this a 7 out of 10.
I'm gonna give it an 8. I think
That's
it just
very
works.
valid. I was thinking about that and then went down a bit. Next, we have Veteran Bodyguard, which is a creature human for 3 white white. As long as it's a 2/3. As long as it's untapped, all damage that would be dealt to you by unblocked creatures is dealt to Veteran Bodyguard instead.
I think my problem with this card is that it both incentivizes blocking with it because it forces you to keep it untapped and also makes it take damage from the creatures that are attacking you.
Yeah,
And so that means like the block there is pretty worthless. I think that if it had to be tapped to do it, I think that would actually been a much more interesting design
agreed.
in terms of you'd have to change your play decisions and make it based on how aggressive can you be in order to take the damage under your bodyguard. Obviously, it wouldn't work as well flavorfully, which I will say this does work exceptionally well flavorfully,
For sure.
but overall, it's just a weird effect that kind of leads to a lot more of the turtling we see.
Yeah, which is a big problem that white has in alpha in general. Uh,
Yeah. Other than that, I would rank this a 5 because it has its pros, it has its cons. I think.
yeah, I'm gonna give it a 4. I think. Um, I also don't like the flavor text. I feel like it's just like very boring. Next up, we have Wall of Swords. This is a creature wall with defender with flying. Or sorry, it's 3 white. Or it is 3 generic mana, 1 white mana, and it's a 3/5 flyer with defender. I really like this card off of flavor alone. I think Wall of Swords is probably the single coolest thing you can make a wall out of, period.
Definitely. I think it's super interesting the context. I love the art here. It just looks
This card has
it's
so many
interesting.
arts, and all of them pretty much are good.
Yeah. And I think overall just having that 3/5 flyer wall is an interesting point of design because it's you get to block off flying creatures, you get to deal some damage to them, and but it's the wall's at a point where it's still able to die
Yeah,
because it's only 5 toughness, which is still pretty big in terms
especially
of
in Alpha.
early Magic, but there are things that we can see that can beat it.
Yeah, I also really like the flavor text. Um, I think it's just good flavor text. Like, it seems like something I could see in a modern core set, pretty much.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to define the card. I think I would give it a 7. It's
I
just
think I'm also going to give it a 7. I think it's really good. Next up, we have White Knight. This is a creature, human knight, with white white, with first strike, protection from black, and it is a 2/2. Um, this is a mirrored pair with a card in black that we'll get to later that does the same thing, but for protection from white, and it's black. Um, I mean, I think it's solid.
yeah, I think there's not much interesting about this other than the fact that it's except for its history and magic and like the introduction of the mirrored pair as something well, not obviously not the only mirrored pair, but like the most iconic mirrored pair,
I
probably
think
apart
that
from
probably the two most iconic mirrored pair in Magic are both from Alpha, which are White and Black Knight, and red elemental and blue elemental blast.
Yeah, I agree. That was what I was gonna say. But I think overall it just works as a fine design, fine introduction to mirrored pair.
Yeah, I think I'd give it a 5 out of 10.
I'd give it a 5.
Next up, we have our last card for this episode, uh, and the last white card in this set, Wrath of God. This is a sorcery for 2 white mana, or for 2 generic and 2 white mana, with destroy all creatures they cannot be regenerated. This is in my top 10 Magic cards, I think. I really, really like Wrath of God.
Yeah, I think wrath effects in general are super good for the game in terms of it allows you to reset your board, it allows you to, take advantage of parity in a way that's not evident because of the fact that you can destroy more of your opponent's creatures, obviously. So I think that wraths in general are super good design, and this is a solid. This introduction to them is just a really good version of the card that's well playable and
Yeah. I think that I'll admit that a lot of the reason why I like this card is not because of the version in alpha. There's one art of it. I'm gonna check real quick what the art is because
is that the Heliod art?
it's not the Heliod art. It is the art that started in 7th edition. The art that started in 7th edition is probably it's one of my favorite arts in Magic. I think it's really good, and I love what they did to make it into Damnation. So, yeah, I would give this I think this is probably my favorite white card in the set, and in terms of design as well, I think I'd give it an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I'd agree with an 8. I think just overall it works as a very simplistic version of this effect that we've all, seen every set. But yeah, an 8 works for me because it's good.
Yeah, so this has been our pilot episode of Weathering the Storm. So I'd like you all to subscribe to our YouTube channel and go follow our Twitter. That'll be in the link in the description of this video. We're going to try and, once we have some episodes up and running, we might try and get on to, for example, Apple Podcasts. But for now, we just have a YouTube channel. So I hope you all have a great day, night, whenever you're watching this.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening,
stay
everyone.
Safe. We're all in this times, and I know we started this partly because for me, boredom, but I also think it's just a cool thing to do.
Yeah, quarantine sucks.
Bye.